Hi, in this video I wanted to show how to create eyelashes that looks more or less like this. We will use the curves from grid and kinda create this grid to guide the hair strands. So to create the grid, I will use Shift 8 at plane and scale this like that in edit mode and Control R to add few subdivisions. The less geometry, the easier it will be to work with. So I will now move this closer to the character in the center between eyes, tap into edit mode and just move this where your character eyelashes should be. I will hide the old version, maybe switch to the solid view, and okay, with the soft selection enabled, I can move this and place into the position. The advantage of using the grid guide is that, okay, so with soft selection, scroll up to reduce the size and move this into the position. The advantage of using grid guide mesh is that we can also use this not only for guiding the hair, but we can use this for low poly version. So we can achieve both, get the low poly mesh and guide the hair strands with the same mesh. Okay, so let's say you will want to spend as much time as you want to make it look kinda close to your character. And okay, this is good enough. And I want to maybe, instead of creating just flat mesh like that, bend this out, bend this like that. So I will add Control R subdivision, select the first loop, and then using Mira tool, this is like free add-on, I can bend the one side outside like that, and then Control 2 to add subdivision. In the subdivision modifier, it is important to use keep corners in both of these, or the UVs may be messed up if you do not select keep corners. So anyway, I think the mesh is too much embedded into the character head. So I will tweak this, fix that. Anyway, I do not want to spend too much time on poly modeling, so let's just jump to the modeling the hair. So if I isolate this, the root of the hair strands, I want them to be placed in here. So I select this first loop by pressing Alt right click, select this loop, Control E, mark sharp. So this will still be the roots for the hair strands. I can now press Control Shift H, cards from grid surface, and that's it. We created a bunch of flat hair cards. Instead of flat hair cards, I will switch profile to round profile without UVs. You can use circle, but we don't use the texture for this, so use just round profile. Reduce radius, like, I don't know, 10 times at least. Okay, a bit more, so divide this maybe by 3, and that's it. Now we can tweak the settings, so we can go to open the same panel. You can open same panel in here, or you can just go to the side panel. We do not need align tilt, since for the circular profile aligning tilt will do nothing. We do not need UVs. We can bump up strands count, then maybe add radius set to taper those. Then in the strand generation, again, you can mask this to remove a bunch of strands and make it less uniform. Maybe bump up density a bit more, then randomize spacing a bit on, play with the seed values. And now let's see how this would look if I maybe go to the shaded view, and we do not see anything. The geometry is there, but we do not see anything because by default, if you create hair, it will use the hair tool default material. You can see that in the profile options. So instead of using this material, that is expecting texture with UVs to work correctly. We have no UVs, so instead we will switch this to just basic solid material. I already created this eyelashes. This is just principled dark colored material. So this is what we get right now. And to make it more interesting, we can go to the deformers, maybe add a bit of noise. The default global scale is good for the cube, but this is way smaller, so around 10 times or even more. So now I reduce the noise, and then I will get rid of the uniform noise amplitude per strand, reduce this more, and maybe move the influence range to the tips by increasing this influence range. So this is the result we get right now. Now I like the noise happening in this side, but the noise is too strong for the shorter strands. So I will mask the amplitude with the length mask. So now the shorter strands receive zero noise. Maybe I will add a bit of noise in the shorter strands, and the longer will receive full noise. So okay, now this is looking kind of okay. We can bump up even density more, but what if we wanted to get some clumps effect? So for that we can add one more system and then clamp those strands to those parent system. So it will be clear if I show you. So we will add one more strands from grid. And this is the new system that we will want to use as parent and guide for the first one. So I will name this parent, move this up, and I will assign p tag for parent. So in the second system, I will maybe show you, this is the new one we created. And in the second system, we can name this child. And in the parent column, I will use the same p tag. So now those are connected. Nothing changed yet, but if I add maybe clamp, you see the clamps are working since we parented current system to the p tag, to the parent tags strands. So you can tweak the results, maybe add a bit of randomization to the clamp effect, increase randomization range, etc. Then add back the noise, and we still see the parent strands. So in the second system strands generation option, there is option to remove parent strands. So the clamp will still work, but the parent strands won't be rendered anymore, and they are kind of removed. So maybe we can add a bunch of more strands like that. And let's say we like the effect. Maybe I can tweak the guide mesh a bit more and maybe move this like so. So the idea is now we would want to bake those strands to low poly mesh. And as I mentioned, we can use this grid guide mesh as low poly version. So first, let's add UVs to this mesh, grid mesh. In the UV image editor, I will select all the faces, press U, unwrap, and that's it. That is good enough. We can jump back to layout, and now we want to bake this to low poly version. How to do this? Where there is option to use the hair baking setup. So I will press import baking scene. This will import baking hair scene into current file. Press OK. And this is the hair tool default setup. I can show you we have now two scenes. One, the original one, and this is the new one imported. And we do not want to bake those. So we'll select delete and let's switch back to the main scene. So I want to bake this object. Now the issue is that how do I link this from working scene to baking scene? There is the Control L option, transfer link data, and we can now tell it to link current object to baking hair scene. And if I switch back to the baking scene, maybe it will be hard to see, but this is the object. Now the only issue is that if I like move this or do anything in the baking scene with this object, switch back to the main scene, you see this object also is moved because they are kind of linked. So the way I do this, I will undo, switch back to the scene. So instead of using this object, I will use Alt-D to create linked copy. So linked copy basically means that if I do an edit, like I change the clamp effect or something, you see it is affecting both of these, since those are linked copies. If you want to unlink, you can press this number 2, and then this will be unlinked. Only changes are happening now on the right. But I will undo this, and let's see. Let's make them keep them linked. Okay, so let's repeat. Control L, link this to the baking scene, and this was linked to baking scene. I do not need this object in the working scene, so I will remove it. This, if I switch now to the baking scene, you see this is, well, we have both versions actually. So I can remove the left one, and this is the one I move it to the right and duplicate it. Just to make sure, I will switch to the working scene. Yes, this is the one in the left. And on the baking scene, this is the one we will use for baking. So anyway, there is option to flatten current object to the UV shape of the strands base mesh. So we just created UVs for the grid. We can now use these UVs to flatten the to flatten the hair. So we will use this UV map we just created. Press OK. And if I move camera to the camera view using 0 key, this is the hair. I can enable maybe different render paths. And basically, you can see this is the UV we created, and haircut is flattened to this UV shape, and we can use this trick to bake from camera. So I will just plug in any texture, any path in here. We do not need high resolution, and just select any passes that you want. So maybe I will select both with shift click, both of these, press bake, and that's it. Those are baked. I can show you. This is the one, the second one. We can now jump back to the switch to the main scene. And for this grid mesh, now we can apply the textures. So I will create Shift D copy. There is no need to be linked copy. First, let's jump to the material object view, to the object display viewport settings. Switch this to the textured. So now it is rendered as solid geometry. We can now add new material, and we will apply the baked textures to this material. Jump to the shading. In the material editor, Shift A, search for image, and pick the texture, one of the baked textures. So I will select the opacity. Let's preview. Control Shift click on the node to preview the material. This requires Node Wrangler free add-on to be enabled. Anyway, now this is the opacity texture. We can connect the color input with the alpha. Then let's see how this looks on the shader. And it is not looking good. So we'll jump to the material properties, scroll to the bottom, settings, switch opacity to alpha hashed, and now this works correctly. We can change color to something darker, or if you wanted, you can Shift D this node, select the other pass, and you could then make this like tips white, root darker. Anyway, and that covers, I think, everything I wanted to show. I can hide those objects and move this to the left and add maybe mirror modifier. And depending, you could repeat the steps for the bottom, or if you are lazy, then do this like I do, scale this up, flip, and I can see those verts were merged when I scaled the object. So I will enable tool settings, disable automatic merging in here. So I will scale this. Now I see those verts are no longer merged. Let's say, okay, disable the connected, enable connected only. And after a bit of tweaking, you can make this work with just one texture. So yeah, I think that covers everything I wanted to show about creating of the eyelashes. Hope you like this video. See ya.